here. She does the intro, so obviously we'll miss Kiran today. She couldn't make it due to some her other conflicts. So we'll get started. Just before, so let me just tell you quickly about Thai. For some of you who are new to this event today, how many of you are new today? Can I see some hands? Wow, it's great. I really appreciate your coming here and we're really excited. So Thai is a non-profit organization and started in early 90s by a number of South Asian successful entrepreneurs who wanted to give something back to the society. So the idea was to foster entrepreneurship. As you can see, that's our objective. And what Thai has basically 4 constituencies. So number 1 is we have a group of highly accomplished people who have been executives and entrepreneurs in the valley or around, and they are called charter members. In fact, we should have a number of them here. So let me see some hands. So you know who all these people are. So anyway, try to network with them if you need them as advisors, investors, or any other contact, so they could be very helpful. So second constituency is members, which is general members. Anyone can be a member of Thai organization, and those who are not members, so please, I would encourage you to sign up, because I myself am a beneficiary of being a member since Thai started. Actually, I remember back in '93, I went to a small event. Someone said, "Hey, there is this group of entrepreneurs who are getting together," and I remember Dr. Prabhu Goyal, who was one of the early Indian entrepreneurs, had started a company in early 80s, and in '89 sold to Cadence, bootstrapped it for $90 million, and that was like, for us in those days, was a huge success. So he came and spoke about his experience, and which was really inspirational, especially for me. And then '94 was the first ThaiCon we had. And one more question I would like to ask: how many of you been to ThaiCons? Okay. And how many of you have been to every ThaiCon? So I'm one of them too. Since '94, I've been to every one of them. I don't know how. It's just like was my going to Makkah. Not that I'm religious or I'm, whatever. So anyway, so ThaiCon is one of the great events. It's one of the largest entrepreneur conference for entrepreneurs. This year we had it in May. About over 3,000 people show up. In the beginning, I remember in '94 there were about 500 people, and we were really excited. It was in downtown Fairmont, and so that's where we started. And with that, now not only Thai has expanded beyond Silicon Valley, it's over into a number of countries. There's over 50 chapters and over 12,000 members. And in fact, for Thai Global, we have our Thai Global President, Mr. P.K. Agrawal. He's here. And we have Thai has gone into places you couldn't even, probably wouldn't even think of, like all the way in Europe, Asia, South Asia. So it's just, the idea is to just reach out to as many as entrepreneurs possible. And now, in terms of the constituencies, as I said, charter members, then one of the other constituencies are sponsors. So we have a number of sponsors who are kind of backbone for this Thai organization, which keeps it running. That's why we are able to offer these programs at such a almost like break-even cost price to all of you, and bring out a lot of insightful talks from successful entrepreneurs. So do we have Stan or some of the sponsors here today? Okay. So anyway, so that's and then what Thai does is basically we have a number of programs, as you can see on the slide here. So one of the program is the main program, flagship program, is ThaiCon, which I just talked about, and then we have special interest groups groups which are around the trends in the marketplace. So like we have social media, cloud, and life sciences, and mobility this year. So we have, and then also, then we have co-chairs of those programs who are all volunteers, again, entrepreneurs and other executives from the domain expertise. And similarly, this year, like I said, I was always inspired by coming and listening to other entrepreneurs talk about their successes. So we launched, and I'm a chair for Thai programs starting this January. So I thought we should revive some and bring some new programs. So we launched this program called My Story, and this is the 4th event. And so Raju is the 4th entrepreneur we're bringing in. Idea behind My Story was to bring entrepreneurs who have successfully exited their company over the last 12 to 18 months, so they can come and share their story and talk about their lessons and the challenges and whatever they went through. And then obviously you can ask a lot of questions. Then another program we launched last year was called Thai Angels. I don't know if we have some of the steering committee members here. Thai Angels. Looks like, okay, so Thai Angels was launched in August of last year. So one of the things, as you know, in last few years, what was happening was a lot of companies were looking for money, market was down, and some of the companies nowadays don't need much of the money, they need about $500,000 or something. And so we launched that program last year in August. I mean, started in early last year under Venk Shukla, one of our charter members and directors, and 7 or 8 steering committee members right from the beginning, including myself. And since August, we are having that meeting of Thai Angels is held every month. So basically, we bring in 3 companies after having them go through a selection process where 20-25 companies apply. And then 7, 8 companies are invited in. Like yesterday was the screening, so out of 8, 10 companies, 3 are selected. Then they're presented in front of Angels, which is next Monday. And so those who are, who are my angel investors or who want to invest, so please feel free to contact me or any of the Thai members. We could invite you as a guest. So next Monday we'll have one of the Thai Angel events, and we have 3 to 4 companies presenting. And so since August, every month, 1 company on an average has been funded. And a lot of them have got even already VC money, so that's what, which is another of interest. You can please spread the word out. So those are some of the 2 new programs, and then obviously we hold a number of other programs like mixtures, etc., where you can come and network. So without taking too much of time, so what I would like to do is today's program, we're really thankful to Raju, who's an accomplished entrepreneur. Anyway, you will hear from him about his story, to be here with us and share his entrepreneurial journey. So I'd like to invite Som Shankar Das, who is one of our charter members and an accomplished entrepreneur himself, as well as venture capitalist. So Som has known Raju for a while, and currently he is partnered with another charter member, Murali here, of Business Accelerator, which helps mid-stage companies. So please feel free to connect with Som, as well as Murali is sitting there. He's one of our charter members. Murali, can we see her? And Murali is, by the way, also chair for Thai Institute, which is another program very geared towards entrepreneurs. So Som will introduce Raju, and I really appreciate Som having you over here.
So, good evening. It is a pleasure to have this opportunity to introduce somebody I've known for almost 25 years. And that was a time I think in 1986, when the Valley was truly Silicon Valley. Raju was in Intel, and I was in a small company called VLSI Technology. So we came together through the efforts of a small organization that had been started around that same time frame called SIPA. And that's how I met Raju. For a while I lost contact with Raju until I got reintroduced to Raju through Kanwal Rekhi, who was an angel investor in Sierra Atlantic. And if you go back to the late 90s, that was a time when IT services were sort of coming into the front, and I had the opportunity to invest in a few IT service companies, including Sierra Atlantic, which all of them did quite well actually. One of them is a public company in India. The one just recently got sold to Genpact. But it was an interesting time to make investments, and once I got introduced or reintroduced to Raju, it was a matter of time before we invested, and I was actually investing along with NEA. So that was in 1999, I think, when it was a very small company. It was about $16 million. But since then, the company has gone from strength to strength. I left Walden International, which was my VC firm those days, and I went on to start my own company, but I have stayed in touch with Raju almost for the entire decade of 2000. And I'm very happy to say that the exit that Raju made in December 2010 was just a wonderful experience for everybody who was involved with the company. From my perspective, Raju actually epitomizes the basic skills and strengths that you need to build a company successfully, which is a lot of perseverance and an ability to build a company brick by brick. So that is really what I learned watching Raju. But I'm going to now give Raju the stage and let him say in his own words, his experiences. Raju.
Thank you, Som, and thank you, Naveen, for this wonderful opportunity. And good evening, everyone. And really, really delighted to have this opportunity to share the story of Sierra Atlantic. And it's really an honor and a privilege, to be with you all today. I appreciate you making the time. And as soon as I can get my slides up here. So, as Sue mentioned, this has been, is it okay by the way? I prefer being here then, yeah. So, I mean, this is not your kind of typical Silicon Valley, get to, 5 years surrender, have a big exit, either IPO or an acquisition. It certainly has been a long journey for me. And at the same time, even the field that I'm in is IT services, and it may or may not be applicable to many of you from that industry segment standpoint. So what I've tried to do is to really extract kind of the key learnings, that I'm hoping would apply in any field of entrepreneurship, just from my own perspective, right, from my experience. And the way I structured this is I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about my background before I started off, my life as an entrepreneur, because that kind of gives you a context for the decisions that I had to make or not make at times. And in many ways, I feel sort of a good way to think about my journey is, I thought, for the matter, most entrepreneurs, I would say, is a wonderful saying that's in Chinese, so I only know the translation of it. This Deng Xiaoping, who you probably all know of, right? The kind of the architect of modern China. When he was asked about, how we sort of transformed China so dramatically over a short period of time. And his answer was, it's like crossing a river by feeling the pebbles. So yes, indeed, you have to get to the other side of the river, but you don't quite know the path most of the times. And that's really been my journey, and likewise for, I think, most other entrepreneurs. So hopefully you're making enough forward steps and not, too many backward steps, and sometimes, of course, sideways, as you feel those pebbles. So with that, let me just talk about. Okay, so I said I'll talk about kind of my background. Started with my high school years. I know this might surprise you, but I actually went to military school. So the picture at the bottom was actually taken by my little niece when she was visiting this school called Science School Korukonda. There's one of these in every state in India, and my dad probably thought, well, that's a good place for discipline, and I was sitting out there. And, so I started at a pretty young age when I was 10, and and that's like about 24 hours to get there those days. That's Vizag on the east coast of India, for those of you who may not know. And interestingly, after that I went to my college, which was 24 hours away because the trains got faster in North India. And today it takes about the same time to go from here to India. And it is again a place where it really drilled into your head that you should try and get into armed forces, because that's where all your jobs are secure. For one, I mean, there are not that many jobs outside, right? And when we're growing up, it's either become a good engineer or a doctor. In science school, it is all about getting the military, armed forces, because life is very secure. You have some of the best perks and all that. And all our heroes, if you look at, were people are what we used to call old boys, or alumni who would come back. These are like colonels or Army, Navy, Air Force officers. And it is a particularly difficult environment from that standpoint for someone who really wanted to become an engineer. I don't think I could have gotten into the armed forces even if I tried. But anyway, that's you know, that's the background. And I think most of you probably have a picture like this in your album, and you know, picture where your own children may not recognize you. And you know, so it's one of those. This is actually one of my class pictures, and we were lined up based on height, so it's not hard to figure out what row I might be in. That is, you know, but you know, this is a group I'm really proud of. My class, I should tell you this. You know, we had this called National Defense Academy. I don't know how many of you know that. NDA. It's like the West Point of India. So you know, and the school that sends the maximum number of kids to NDA each year, they win what's called the Defense Academy Trophy. And it is very rare for any school from South India ever to win that. By and large, but that was the case back then. You know, it was mostly the schools in, you know, in the North India. We have kind of grown up with a little bit more awareness in the armed forces and all that, right? But my batch actually won that. Of course, I let the averages down for my class. So we had like about 54, 55 students in our class, and you know, but 18 of them made it into the armed forces. So today, a lot of them are kind of, you know, senior army officers and Navy and Air Force. But anyway, I chose a path of, you know, certainly not an entrepreneur at that time. I just wanted to become an engineer. Partly, I think, because my dad was an engineer and, you know, was pretty good at math and science, like most of you are, I'm sure. So anyway, I won't tell you where I am. Some of you can recognize that. But you know. Moving on, after that was, of course, you know, my college years, and that's BITS Pilani. Many of you probably know this, but BITS is, you know, consistently ranked as India's #1 private university for science and engineering. And in many ways, that kind of became the foundation for my, you know, professional life when I look back at it. And it's also back then we had you know, unassigned admissions, meaning, you know, only half of the students would go into engineering, the other half would go into arts, sciences, and, you know, economics and all that, and languages. And I actually got in through a waiting list, which means, you know, the last 5%. So I had no right to expect that I would get into engineering, let alone electronics engineering, which is what I wanted to study. And the reason why I'm kind of mentioning that is, you know, to some extent, it is not, hopefully it wasn't arrogance, but it was just a certain amount of risk-taking, or, you know, because I remember my dad asked me, "Are you sure you want to go there?" Because I had other choices where I had my engineering, you know, confirmed, and the degree and all that, the major within engineering. But for some reason I felt, well, once I go there, because it's all based on performance, that, you know, you get your degree, your major. And, you know, so things did work out for me, because at the end of the third year, you get into your major actually. End of second year, based on your performance, you get into, you know, engineering or sciences and all that. But, so I ended up doing electronics engineering, and, you know, like a lot of kids back then, we all wanted to go to America. This was in 1981 when I graduated from BITS. And you know, so I didn't think much about any other options, and so I applied. I came here to the US straight from BITS, pretty much, to Virginia Tech, and one of the reasons for that was it had a $10 application fee. My budget was like $40. It's probably not that unusual for many of you who came here about that time, right? I mean, now you have, you know, scholarship, student aid, and all that, but back then you really had to scramble and figure out how much you can afford even for the application fee. You know, once you apply, hopefully some college will take you in with a scholarship, and, you know. So sometimes, I mean, your decisions are made based on completely different criteria, right? And one of the other reasons why I went to Virginia Tech was some of my seniors from BITS Pilani were already there. So they would, you know, tell you about these stories and all that. And so you get to hear about it. So that certainly makes it easier, also when you go in there. And so after Virginia Tech, you know, I came to Intel. That was my first job. I started in engineering. And there again, the guy who recruited me into Intel is brilliant engineer Chandar Sarna, my manager at the time. And he happened to be, you know, from Pilani. I didn't know that at the time, but you know, he certainly thought, well, he's come from the school, so maybe he's got at least hopefully some good academic background, and, you know. So, and then before I get into my kind of beginnings of Sierra Atlantic, the guy I founded my company Sierra Atlantic with is another classmate of mine from BITS Pilani. So, I mean, there is definitely big impact, of my college years on my professional life. And it's one of those things, in your own innocent way, in the college dorms, you sit there and say, "Arey yaar, kuch karenge someday." You'll sit down, you'll do a business together or something. Me and this classmate of mine, Saratura, we had that sort of a, I guess, idea. I can't even call it a dream, but it just, And so well after I graduated, of course, from Virginia Tech and a few years at Intel, I teamed up with Sarat. Sarat, I often say, is a smart guy who decided to stay back in India, because for my career, I had to anyway reconnect with India. And so that's kind of, really the big impact that the college had in my life. And many times I see that a lot of entrepreneurs, they do choose when they, team up with somebody, it's folks that they worked with at a place, or, or college years or whatever, and that's, not so unusual for me. And you can see the difference from the, uniform all the time in Chinese school, kind of lazing around. And in fact, I think one of the guys is at the back. I'm not in this picture, but it's a typical college thing, as you can see. All right. So the thing I wanted to say here is, it's really, I know the title is my story, but this is really a team that helps build a company. And it's just not my story, but our story. And I wanted to say a few words about some of the folks here. So this is my management team. At the time, we got acquired by Hitachi Consulting. Again, there are several people behind this, of course. There are about 2,400 employees worldwide. There are several other managers at various levels. But very quickly, Bob Hirsch, he's the CFO, and he's, I don't know how many of you read this book, Blueprint to Your Billion, or heard Blueprint to Your Billion. One of the things he talks about in that book is, every company that gets to $1 billion, right? And again, this is just, you can't generalize all these things, but nevertheless, majority of them, what he found in his analysis, the author, was, all these companies have somebody who's focused on the outside, the customers and all that, and a person that's sort of focused really on the inside, on the operations and making sure that runs efficiently and all that. So Bob is definitely that Mr. Inside for me, over the years. A lot of public company experience. And GK, Suresh, Alan, and Ruben, and Kavita, the 7 of us are based here in the US. Alan is based in Boston. And the rest of them, 4 of them at the bottom. Sarat was my classmate from Pilani. Yashwant, Sanjay, and Firoz are based in Hyderabad. Xiaomin is based in Guangzhou in China. And just a few other facts that maybe they'll give you a little bit of an insight on the company and all that. I would say 9 of these people, with the exception of Alan, Xiaomin, and Suresh, had been with the company for 10 years or longer. And that says something about it. And not necessarily in the roles that they were in, the same role. They've all, in fact, 4 of them started pretty much at entry level out of college. Kavita, Ruben, Firoz, and GK, I think he had a little bit of experience, and then grew into these sort of senior management roles within the company. So that is something that I always, in fact, I think I'll talk about later, this sort of NCG program, new college, NCG is the term Intel used, new college grads. It really brings in a certain vitality into the organization. I've always found that to be very beneficial. Intel at one point when I was there, they had this criteria, I think about 25% of all new recruits every year had to be a new college grad. So I don't know if they still have that program, but it's something that I certainly found a lot of benefit from. And as long as you create the right opportunities for growth, right? Yeah, I think that's mainly. And Alan Dairy and Xiaomin came to us through an acquisition of a company about 3-4 years ago. It's a company out of China. And Suresh joined us about 5 years ago. Again, this was the kind of the top management team at the time of the acquisition. Just, on my own story, a little bit more insight into that. So while at Intel, I know Som talked about CEPA, right? In some ways, I had this sort of a confused state of mind of doing something with India, for India, in India, early years when I just came out of college and while at Intel. And that's the beginnings of CEPA, Silicon Valley Indian Professionals Association, an organization that we started, along with a couple of other young engineers here. And in many ways, it's a precursor to the Thai organization. How many of you heard of CEPA, by the way? Okay, a lot of you, yeah. So, still an active organization. It obviously has sort of, changed hands from one generation of leader to another several times now. And So through that is how I got introduced to some of the companies out of India, Wipro, and I think Infosys was not as active at that time, but we used to run these events called Software India here. The basic charter between CIPA was to promote business between India and the US, right? Something you don't need to do as an organization as much now. But for me, because I was very passionate about that and I wanted to sort of get connected with India in some way, that's a great forum for me to run into people like, Ashok Suta, who used to run Wipro at that time, or, some of the folks from the other companies, TI folks were here, Cadence. There are very few, not that many. HCL, Arjun Malhotra, you talked about, Arjun, TechSpan, and yeah, so while at Intel, we started this program with Wipro. At the time, Intel was sort of going into this, always trying to hedge their bets against Microsoft, right? Kind of, they were, both of them were trying to hedge bets, but really their fortunes were kind of destined, to go together for a long time. So they were looking to port Unix onto the Intel operating system, and many of you may know this, that India actually had very deep expertise in India, meaning primarily HCL, Wipro, and some of those companies in the Unix operating system. So we approached Wipro for that purpose, to port the Unix onto the Intel platform. So that's how I saw the Wipro guys. I said, hey, if they can do it, why not me, right? And 93, I'd say, well, I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but it had to do something with India because that was my passion. Otherwise, I didn't care about it. I was not into wanting to build a big gadget, next big gadget or something like that. And so I said, well, if the Wipro guys can do, why not me? And frankly, I think Thai is a phenomenal institution for that matter, because in many ways, I could not relate to any of the other entrepreneurs that, whether it is Scott McNeely, Bill Joy, or Gates, or, Larry Ellison and the rest, right? But when a Kanwal Reddy can do it, or when a Suhas Patil can do it, I say, hey, why not me? There was that. Certainly Thai, I think, has been a wonderful institution from that standpoint. So that's kind of how I got started with Sierra Atlantic, and it was all self-funded. So I tell people there's a benefit to being undercapitalized in the early stages. It teaches you some good habits. And 99 is, of course, when, went with Som and NEA folks came in. Walden and NEA co-invested. And GE came in right after that. In fact, they wanted to get in the first round, but, they couldn't. And so 3 months later. So for all practical purposes, there was really only one round. We raised 17.4 million back then. And, fortunately, after that, we never had to go back to the well for, more cash. And a lot of the credit really goes to the management team there, Bob and Kavita, the corporate controller, and the rest of them. But, in a journey like this in 17 years, you also have some people that have had a significant role that may not have been with us for the entire 17 years, but quite a few have been there for 8, 9 years. In fact, Mark Hebert, I see him in the audience, and he was one of those execs who came from Oracle and joined us. That's Joe Gariali, the CTO, who again spent about 10 years and moved on. Okay, I don't expect you to read this slide as much, so sorry about that, but I just wanted to really kind of share my thoughts on the importance of corporate culture, and and to me, that's largely reflected by the core values of the company. So when we are about 50, 60 employees is when we sort of engaged our employees worldwide to document what these core values are that represent Sierra Atlantic. And because we are starting to scale, and they said, well, we can't take it for granted. You really have to sort of document these things. And when we started the process, I said, well, there are two to me that are kind of non-negotiable, and they're right up there. One is trust. If you don't have that, nothing else matters. I mean, and trust is not just with your customers, by the way. It's with your employees, it's with all your stakeholders, investors, your vendors too, right? And so that's one. And the second one is one I grew up with at Intel. That's results. The emphasis on really setting aggressive goals. In other words, effort is good, but results is what matters. And at every stage, people have to be accountable, starting with me. And that kind of leads me into the other value there, titled learning. And this is the notion of building an adaptive engine. So talked about 17 years. I mean, 17 years, industry changes, people change, a lot of things happen, right? So how do you build that sort of an adaptive engine that constantly adjusts to what is right for that particular environment? GE is, of course, a phenomenal example of a light bulb company that became a conglomerate, industry conglomerate now. So that's the idea behind the learning organization. And as a CEO, I often felt, I can be the biggest asset for the company or the biggest liability. Think about it, that's really true. If I don't continuously invest in learning, and there's a nice saying, I probably don't have it exactly right, but something like, good people learn from their mistakes and wise people learn from others' mistakes, right? So you really, so that's something that I would strongly encourage. And you'll be surprised how open a lot of the other CEOs are, in sharing what's happening in the industry, the business, and all of that. So the best practice I often used to, and I still do, actually make the time. And a lot of the companies out of not just India but China here, the CEOs, again, it doesn't help me a whole lot to talk to the CEO of Infosys or TCS, but companies somewhere in the $100 million to $1 billion range, there are plenty of them, public companies, and you'll be surprised how open they are, how much information they'll share with you. For one, it's a large industry, it's a huge industry, and we don't always compete with each other. And that has helped me immensely, over the years. Just as a practice, I would strongly encourage, and if you can. And the rest are, this notion of, family, and that's just more than your employees, but really responsibility for the community that you participate, that you live in, right? And empowering individuals to make their decisions. In some ways, I feel, one of the biggest assets that I had, over the years, for sure, is that sense of ownership that people had, not just at my direct staff level, but further down. And I really think that comes from sticking to the values and empowerment in particular. Yeah, so this is a program that I just thought I'll give you. This will give you a little bit of insight into our company culture and the things that matter, right? So we have a program called Bring Your Parents to Work, and this was initiated about, I would say, 8 years ago by our team in India. And in India, in a lot of the Asian culture, certainly in India and China, parents do have a significant influence on the decisions of adult children. I can't say the same thing about my children growing up here, but and so this was actually a photo from, I think, last October. In fact, I think it was on October 2nd, Gandhi Jayanti Day, Saturday, that we had this Bring Your Parents to Work. So when the new employees come in, it's mostly new college grads, and we invite their parents. And so as part of the employee orientation program, towards the end of that, the parents come and spend half a day, a little longer, and so they interact with the management team, and one of those sessions is also interaction with the CEO. And I tell you, these are parents, many of them, they haven't come to a building like that. Frankly, my own parents, they didn't know about this place in the high-tech. How many of you are familiar with the high-tech city in Hyderabad? Okay, quite a few, yeah. But it's very similar to a lot of the other high-tech centers in India these days. There are two Indias if you go there. There is this high-tech city India, the Jubilee Hills, if you will, in Hyderabad, and there's a rural India. For a lot of the people who come from rural India, which is where most of these parents come from, they haven't even seen, they don't even know that there's a place like this in Hyderabad. My parents didn't, till they came to that campus. So it is such an amazing experience for many of them. And then for them to hear about the company and all of that, it really, really goes a long way. And there's a dad there asking some questions, very involved. I wish I had another picture. There was, towards the end, in the same session, in fact, my HR head, he invited some of the parents to come and talk. And mostly these moms, generally they don't go out, and some of the dads, they do, but so after a while, there's one brave mom who came up on the stage and started talking, and then another came. We just couldn't stop after that. And several of these moms, they were saying, hey, I've never done this in my life. I've never gone on a stage like this, but that's how good I feel. I felt so compelled about this. And one of them really had tears of joy when she was talking about Ananda Bashpal in Telugu, she was saying that. And there's one particular example I'd like to mention, if I may, quickly. But there is this mom who said, before I came here, my daughter really wanted to join this company when she got the job offer from Sierra Atlantic. But she also had offers from Wipro and I think some Infosys or one of the other large companies, right? Maybe IBM in that case, but yeah. So she said, but I never heard of Sierra Atlantic. So I was telling her, why would you want to join that company? Why not Infosys or Wipro? And in that particular case, it turns out the dad also knew a little bit about our company, and he said, hey, I think this is the better company for our daughter, Swapna, I think was her name. And the mom, so she was telling me the story, right, later on. She said, for a long time, I wouldn't even tell my friends because I was afraid, they would tell me, well, why would she do that? Like, oh, maybe she really didn't get a job in the other company, that kind of stuff. Like, a lot of social pressures, in India. And finally, the mom gave up. She said, well, there came a point when my husband and my daughter both wanted to join your company, so what do I do? So at that point I gave in. And then of course I went out and told my friends, yeah, they joined this company. And it turns out, fortunately, in that case, some of the other moms, they knew of our company. She's a lady from Vijayawada, And she said, oh, that company, that's very good, we know somebody. And then, the mom started, and of course that day when she came to the offices and through the Bring Your Parents to Work program, she said, well, now I understand why, my daughter really wanted to join this company. Just think about it, how powerful is that? As a CEO, as an entrepreneur, how powerful is that? Now, this is not to say I don't have challenges. There's plenty of challenges. India, attrition rates are very high. Don't get me wrong, okay? But when you can build that kind of a connection, that kind of a relationship with an employee and their family, that's, there's no price you can put on that. Of course, hopefully you can do a good job of, nurturing that employee through the course of his or her career. And, in fact, there are quite a few within Sierra Atlantic today, that I often said, and that's one expectation or promise I couldn't fulfill, I suppose, but I said, someday I hope an NCG, as you call, New College grad, will run this company, and, maybe they'll run the Hitachi Consulting now. So that's still an opportunity. But anyway, I just thought this gives you a little bit more insight into how culture does matter and the value system and all that. By the way, this was profiled quite extensively in Forbes, and in fact, in the reference Wall Street Journal, of a lot of publications in India, as a very innovative program to attract and retain talent, which, as you know, is very competitive in India. In fact, I think Mark had a field day with that, with the press around that particular program.
Those were the days, Raju.
Yes, yes, Mark.
PR mattered.
Yes. Yes. All right, just a few thoughts, some of these I might have already covered, but again, like I said, I tried to come up with things that I felt were not specific to, IT services. But in the early stage, yeah, I'm sure you hear this a lot of times. Just make sure you love what you do. In my case, there was this passion for connecting with India. It may be something very different. You may want to change the world in some ways. And, I don't know how many of you know, Deep Nishar is right here. He's the man behind Android, while at Google, and of course he's at LinkedIn. So, there are opportunities like that, if it happens, probably more in Silicon Valley than any other place, right? But whatever it is that you're passionate about, just make sure, you pursue things that you truly love. And establish a culture early on. I talked about the values, and that's a very important part of the culture. But, one of the other things that we had early on was, we didn't have any private offices. We always had, cubes. And, people would resist that, after a while, because there are folks that came from Oracle, not Mark, but others who came from Oracle, and, or other places that they had private offices. Nothing wrong with it. That works for some companies, but, not for us. So, they would resist that, right? I said, well, if it worked for Intel, why not for Sierra Atlantic? Such a large company. I always felt that was really unique. I felt there was a certain level of openness at Intel because of that, cubicle offices. And now you have a lot of private conference rooms to go meet, and, if you need to yell at somebody or whatever in a meeting, so that does happen, as you know, in workplace. Yeah. And get a mentor. If you can. I was very fortunate to have Kanwal as a mentor, and, guys like Som on the board early on, and, that really changed a lot of things for me. And because these are people who kind of walked down that path before, you just can't, replace that. And the Valley is a great place to find mentors like that. By the way, don't ever think like mentors are doing you a favor. Not at all. The good mentors, definitely, that's not their perspective. In fact, for them, it's a great way to, stay connected with good entrepreneurs and sort of energize themselves and learn things. So, that's something I certainly recommend. Again, some of these are applicable both in early and growth stages. And, the other item there is maybe a little bit specific to our business, but I would say in any industry, you probably have a large gorilla or two, right? So if you can sort of ride their coattail, that's what that's about. Pick something strategic to, a leader in your market space, and do that well, and let them market the heck out of it. And that is kind of the strategy that worked for us early on with Microsoft. When I came out of Intel, I mean, it's a very humbling experience, I tell you. People don't return your calls easily, and I don't get into all of that now, but who cares? I mean, when you're at Intel, it's easy. Yeah, people do call you and all that. But I did have some good, relationship with folks at Microsoft. So we ended up building some unique capabilities around what is called OLE, object linking and embedding. Microsoft was really pushing that very aggressively. It was a big strategic thrust for them. So we did that, and then Microsoft was looking for proof points of companies out there that are doing something innovative with their new technologies, right? So they really put us in the Comdex booth. I mean, there's no way I could have afforded it. This is all before we raised any VC money, right? Even after we raised VC money, Bob wouldn't have allowed me to spend that kind of money anyway. So I mean that with utmost respect, of course, to Bob, my CFO. And likewise with Oracle, they had this big program. Oracle, I mean, Larry is just a brilliant marketeer, as you guys all know. Larry Ellison is just fantastic with that. So every time we would define an enemy and kind of go after that. So there's this big thrust to migrate a lot of the non-Oracle technologies, apps to the Oracle environment. So we built some tools called Forms Genie, so which is the migration tools from non-Oracle to Oracle. That worked beautifully. Again, coming from Intel with a little bit of that background, my approach to services was again building some IP that we could use as a differentiator. And so Oracle was really wanting some technology, some capability along those lines. And that's how we ended up having a very tight relationship with Oracle over the years. And which subsequently some of the folks from Oracle went to Siebel, and that's how I met with Deep. Deep actually was my first $10 million customer. Thank you, Deep, for joining here today. Yeah, while he was at Siebel. And so that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, and the growth stage, again, this is something every VC will tell you, or in every entrepreneur story you hear this, but surround yourself with great talent. The one that I wanted to kind of qualify that a little bit is who can also scale. Because some of the people that help you get to your first $10 million revenue may not be the right people for the 50 million or 100 or 500 or whatever, right? So that's something to keep in mind as you look at your team. And one thing I will say is don't always believe the experts. The founder CEO is a classic one. It's kind of become a gospel. Every time they say, oh, the founder needs to know when to step aside and bring in a CEO. Yes, that's true in some cases, but heck no, if you look at the really great companies, the companies that have lasted, look at any of the companies that have lasted 15, 20 years in the Valley. Who's the CEO? It's almost always the founder, whether it's Larry Ellison at Oracle, Intel, for a long time, Gordon Moore, Andy Grove, and Bob Noyce, of course, Microsoft, Gates, Steve Jobs, Apple, that's a perfect example. Can't find a better example. Probably Google, Facebook, they're still in very early stages, but they'll probably have a similar kind of a track record. So there are a lot of things. When you're in business for 17 years, I'm hoping we can get into some Q&A and we'll get into the other things, but a lot of examples I can think of. We had a dividend a year before Hitachi bought us. A lot of the Silicon Valley folks, including VCs, will tell you, no, you can't do that in a private company. You're supposed to invest that in R&D or whatever. This is baloney. It depends on what your situation is. In my case, that made a huge difference. For the first time, people saw a value on that paper that they were holding. And there is a big demand for that in a stock. Of course, they want cash and stock, but so especially in India where the comp rates are like 15-20% sometimes. And then so anyway, example like NCGs, I think I already talked about the new college grads. I really think that's a very effective program. You can do that. Drop level one-on-ones. This is again a practice that I picked up from Intel. So it's not just with your direct staff, but at the next level or even 3 levels down, if you will. And given, as a CEO, you always have constraints on your time. So one of the things I tried to do was to, spend more of my time with people that are closer to the customers in the drop level one-on-ones. And because that really goes a long way when you have those, periodic. It could be once a month or, sometimes once 6 weeks. Or I don't think I've done any once a quarter, but once in 2 months, I think the longest interval I have done those. Yeah. And communicate and communicate. You can never, over communicate with your people, with your employees, and everybody. And the last thing is this notion of a learning engine that we talked about earlier. And especially as a CEO, I would really, really recommend you constantly have to. Hopefully, I was a much better CEO by the time I was done. From the time I started 17 years ago, but I still made plenty of mistakes along the way, and I do even today. So there can never be an end to that. This is the corporate time. I'll skip this one. I mean, basically this is put together by the bankers. After Hitachi Consulting approached us, actually they made the offer, and we didn't have any bankers involved. But because we had a lot of shareholders, we call that fairness opinion, I think is what they said. So for that we had to engage a banker, and that's their interpretation of the company. You can say success attributed to strong technology partnerships, strategic M&A, investment in proprietary. I mean, they missed the important part of the culture. But, as bankers, right? Yeah. So I thought this kind of a beautiful culmination of a lot of the effort that went into building the company. This is our campus. It is a beautiful, I think, April night. 2008 is when we opened our campus in Hyderabad. It's in the Gachibowli area, and there's so much pride around this, that employees had, And what I also found is, even with customers, it actually matters a lot, at least in IT services, maybe not in other areas, because they go out, they see all these fantastic, townships almost, like Infosys and others, right? So when they see this, I can certainly, point to quite a few substantial size deals that happened after the campus opened. But, the other important detail behind this is a $14 million campus for us. So we did 4 acquisitions before we got acquired. The 5th one was we got acquired, but, 4 acquisitions and this campus, all without raising any additional cash after the first round. I mean, that's very unusual, I'll tell you. Very, very unusual. Another thing, for the last 5 years, and this is not bragging, I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of insight into, yes, indeed, in a very competitive industry like this, you can build substantial value by focusing on a few, things right. And having great team, people like Bob and Kavita and the rest. And I was saying last 5 years, every quarter we had 20% EBITDA, and that's none of the public companies below $1 billion in revenue have that. I mean, I wouldn't know about private companies, but it's very unlikely there are many private companies either. The Infosys, Cognizant definitely did. Actually, Cognizant or Infosys, TCS, they have definitely done that. But so that tells you about the kind of discipline that we have. Whether it is IP that we use as a differentiator, or just managing a cost better, combination of things. But that's in fact a lot of our VCs, so this too. But always described as the most capital efficient company in their portfolio. So I don't know if it's good or bad, but it certainly in the end it was very good shareholder value. Just a couple of slides. I mean, this is on Hitachi now. We are part of Hitachi, and I can answer more of that in the Q&A, I feel like, why we chose Hitachi and all. But, this is very exciting. One of the big considerations for me was, it's not just the economics of the deal, but really I felt this can be a great home for my employees. And, they're probably a little over $100 billion, a 100-year-old company, as you guys know, as many of you might know. And, so today, I talk about learning. A company, 100-year-old company now is really reinventing itself around, what they call the social innovation. This is, to them, this is 3 key areas: water, transportation, and power. So leadership and technology in those 3 areas. And they feel, that is going to give them a significant leadership position, not just for the next 5 or 10 years. The Japanese have a very long-term view of things, 20, sometimes a little too long-term for something that we do normally in technology, but kind of 20, 50-year view even, right? But it's very exciting indeed. This vision is very exciting, and one of the other big objectives for Hitachi is to grow the business of the island of Japan. Right now, I think about half of their business comes within Japan. So that's another big sort of strategic imperative that kind of drove them to this acquisition, right? And I think I'm done with the sort of this part of it, but just close with one last slide. I took Naveen's permission on this, but I thought I should share this with you guys. It is my story, so I thought this is very important to me. So there's a wonderful event called Sevathon. How many of you heard of Sevathon? A lot of you, okay. So it's a very unique program indeed that, to the best of our knowledge, nothing like this has ever been done by any community, let alone the Indian community. We have over 40 different non-profits that come together, to basically the purpose behind that is to recognize, promote and nurture a spirit of giving. We're not saying it's money, I mean time, whatever it is, just get involved. Kind of much like what Thai has done to entrepreneurship. It's our belief that Sevathon over a period of time, this is started by India Community Center, but it belongs to all these different non-profits. Over a period of time, will become that sort of a event certainly it has its roots in the Indian community, but not restricted to the Indian community, much like Thai. And it's actually coming up on July 17th, this Sunday in Baylands Park. And I had the privilege of co-chairing that last year with B.V. Jagdish, who's also here on the board.